I see Ellis Hammond on social media, the first words that enter my mind are faith-based investor. I find there is no separation between Ellis's faith and him as an entrepreneur. For many years, I thought good Christians cannot be entrepreneurs, as the Bible states, money is the root of all evil. So I sat down with Ellis and had a no-holds-barred, unedited discussion about being a Christian entrepreneur. We didn't talk about real estate in this episode. Rather, we focused on pressing questions some faith-driven people out there may be facing. I sincerely hope this episode can help open your heart and help you develop a better understanding of why we can still remain steadfast and true to our faith while building wealth.
All right. Today we have Ellis Hammond joining us. Ellis, welcome to the show.
Dion, what a pleasure to be here, man. Thanks for having me on.
It is a pleasure having you on here. I'm very excited about this. So, Ellis, why don't we just go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about your background and where you are right now with real estate?
Yeah. So I actually, and I'm sure we'll get into this a bit more, but my career started as a Christian pastor and missionary out in San Diego, California, and we were seeking to build communities of faith on college universities kind of across our city. And loved that role and kind of where God had placed us. That I'm originally from South Carolina. We moved to the West Coast, and it was during that period of time where I just saw the needs of our nonprofit and the needs of nonprofits in general, and realized that we wanted to start seeking more creative ways to get access to capital and create an income stream that wasn't so reliant on having to go raise that from other people. And so that was kind of when we started down the path of real estate. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But honestly, man, it has been an incredible journey, as I'm sure you have experienced yourself, that this world of real estate is, it really is all about the relationships, man. And I have been so blessed and so fortunate to just come alongside and partner with some really great people over the last 3 years. So to answer your question, we now have our own investment firm where we're focusing on acquiring multifamily properties, kind of more in the west part of the United States. And then we have our own community and mastermind for faith-driven investors, for those who are really seeking to create capital and build wealth, but really do that in a way that honors God and helps them grow in their faith. So, kind of a unique platform, I would say. So maybe we can get into that today as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty excited about talking about, this topic in particular, especially, growing up, grew up Baptist, basically. Eventually, we converted to Christianity. And I just remember, while I was in school and attended church, back in university, and I would just hear from friends and things, because I've always been like a very ambitious type individual, but they would say, don't go after money and these worldly things. And, money is the root of all evil, and et cetera, et cetera. So, there was a lot of internal conflict that I felt. Perhaps, that's something that you yourself can resonate with. So could you share with our listeners, how did you reconcile these two? Like, what was your initial challenge or struggle that you were dealing with when you started to, pursue this in addition to ministry?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, man. And I definitely struggled. I mean, I would say part of that internal struggle or spiritual struggle, or whatever you want to call it, was probably one of the reasons that I went into ministry, right? Because there was a couple of different things. I think one of the reasons we think money is the root of all evil, because we see what money does. Like, and for me personally, I saw how it created conflict within my family. Right. My parents were divorced at 10 and money was always an issue. So right away, I was like, man, what money does, it separates my family. Right. So that was the first thing. And then I can remember specifically in college, a spiritual mentor of mine saying something along the lines of, the reason I don't have money is because I don't think I would be a good steward of it, because it would have control over my life. And at that time in my life, I thought that was a very godly thing to say, because I was like, oh yeah, he's a godly person, very spiritual, and he just kind of walked away from this idea of money. So I formed these assumptions in my mind of like, first of all, money is not good to go after. And two, I'm not a good steward of money. Or maybe even more personally, to be a really good Christian means you shouldn't go after money, right? And so that might have been a massive, I would not say the reason, but definitely there of like, I kind of formed those mindsets. And so something major had to happen for me to kind of shift out of that. And what that was we formed our mission out in San Diego. We were really building a team of missionaries, and we were raising all the money that we needed in order to fund our mission and do the things that we wanted to do. And one of the guys on our team, he was a young guy, was a student of ours for a while, and came on our team. And about, I don't know, it was probably 4 years in, and he had just come on board. And I remember sitting on the lawn of one of the universities, and he came up to me and he said, "Hey man, I'm really struggling this month." I'm like, "Why? What's up?" He said, I don't have enough money coming in to buy all the groceries that I need in order to eat for the month." We're not in a third world country here. We're in the, San Diego, California. This guy's kind of trusted us to, he's trusted us in a lot of ways. And here he is, can't buy enough food this month. And that was when it hit me that if a guy like this, who's really trying to live his life for God and live on mission and live with a great purpose, what he needs right now is money. Like what he needs right now is capital. And if people like him need more capital to advance God's mission in the world, money must not be that bad, right? And we need people who are seriously focused on creating massive amounts of wealth and massive amounts of capital in order to fund great things, in order to do great things. And I have just seen over and over, it's crazy. We think that money is the root of all evil. The reality is, man, most of the guys I see with money right now, because I have a podcast show called Kingdom Capitalists that interviews, Christian entrepreneurs, business owners. I have a mastermind now full of these guys. The reality is most people who have money are actually like some of the most incredible people you ever meet, because in order to get a lot of money, here's the secret. It's typically not all your money, meaning this, other people had to trust you with their money in order for you to get really wealthy. That's how the wealthy build money, right? They use other people's money in order to do it. So it's a crazy concept to think that people who have a lot of money, are bad or evil, because the reality is the exact opposite. Like you have to be an incredible person in order to amount that type of wealth. And so I'm kind of on a rant now because I'm so passionate about this message, but I definitely think, man, we need more faith-driven people, especially, in Christianity, who are serious about this message of seeing the kingdom come here on earth as is in heaven, as Jesus once said. In order for that to happen, we need the missionaries, but we need the entrepreneurs. We need the business owners, and not just for the purpose of making money. But if you think about this, like, who shapes culture? To be honest with you, man, it's not the missionaries. It's not the pastors. It's the entrepreneurs. It's the business owners, right? Who's shaped culture more than anybody in the last decade? Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, right? Why? Because they created something in the marketplace that everybody's using. And so, it's not just about capital, man. It's about creating culture and having influence and making impact and creating something better, right? And that only happens with entrepreneurs, guys like you and me and your listeners. So,
you still there?
Yeah. I hope you got some good stuff there.
No, I did. Yeah, no, I did. You just like right at the end, you cut out there for a second, but I think we're good.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. So you realize kind of early on that, to kind of further your mission and everything, and to continue to spread the message, that you're going to have to fund this, right? Mm-hmm. So, how, I guess, for some people out, and I mean, it makes perfect sense too. You think about the amount of philanthropy and things that's going on out there, and you have like the Giving Pledge, and you've got some of these billionaires that are going to give away a lot of their money. right? Back to for the good of society and everything. So what kind of, I guess, what kind of like, I don't want to put this like I don't want to say rules, but as far as like money goes, what suggestions would you have for people on actually managing this for Christian investors? Like, how do you go about
Yeah.
managing this like larger
Yeah.
amounts of money you figure?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a journey I'm on, man, for sure. I mean, it's definitely not easy because, I would say Jesus talks about money probably more than anything in the scripture. So I'm not saying that it's not something we should just be flippant about, right? It is a significant topic for us to, um, uh, I guess, think about or consider. I would say the issue or the what I've learned more than anything, like if you want to amount a large amount of money or whatever, I would say it's the wrong focus. What I have learned in doing my podcast, and again, I'm not wealthy. I'm not super wealthy yet, right? We're on our way, I would guess you would say. But I think in some ways we're still on the journey as well and learning. But most of the guys that I interact with, who people I respect, they're not out to amount a large amount of money. What they're out to do is solve a big problem. And I think is that is the kingdom principle there. The kingdom principle is not go and build a lot of wealth. The kingdom principle is solve a massive problem. And when you solve a massive problem for people, money is the byproduct of that. So I think that's like the first thing I've had to kind of transition in my mind. It's not about just creating a bunch of capital. It's how do I go solve a big problem? And I guarantee you, if you can figure that out, people will pay you for it, right? I mean, it's the whole idea of multifamily. Like we solve the problem of the lack of predictability in building wealth. Like it's the whole reason we're in this. It's not because we just like tenants, and we like these large buildings. No, we like a wealth building strategy that we can predict month after month, year after year, which most people think that's what the stock market provides, and it definitely doesn't. Right. And so, we're out to help people create a predictable wealth building strategy. So I think that's one is like solve a big problem. Outside of that, man, like I think it really comes down to having a really good community and people around you who can, I think, keep you in check. I mean, I think another kingdom principle is this, so let me just say this real quick. My podcast show is called Kingdom Capitalists. And we got a lot of pushback for that because it was like, capitalism, kingdom or Christian. I use kingdom and Christian kind of interchangeably. Your audience may not be familiar with that, but Jesus talks a lot about the kingdom. So I talk a lot about the kingdom. And, but this idea of secular capitalism, the whole thing is accumulation. How much can I acquire? Where when I think about the kingdom, it's all about giving and sowing. And so there's some totally different principles when we talk about kingdom capitalism and secular capitalism. But it's hard, man, because when we're in an environment of creating wealth and we look on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, and people are driving the cars and the big houses, and not that, I mean, I hope to have a big house one day. I hope to drive a nice car. But if we're really living for another kingdom, then our goal cannot be accumulation, because this is not our home in the end anyways. And I think you really need people around you to help you just remember that. You need heroes. I mean, honestly, man, that's why I started Kingdom Capitalist, because me as a young man, and I knew so many other people like me that just needed heroes and mentors who had gone before them and really ran this race well, and could be people that we could look to, because the only people I saw in my space were non-Christians, honestly, who were really living out the secular dream. And I knew, even though that's not really what I was called to, because of my faith. And so that's the difference.
So one thing that you just mentioned, you said like basically a large portion of this wealth is basically meant to be to be provision, to the kingdom. Basically, essentially, I understand that as like giving that away. And you also mentioned kind of how you would hope to, have a larger house someday, like, and a nicer car and everything. So where do you, I guess, in your mind, or you're thinking for like the average Christian, where do you draw the line to, I guess, between like excessive and kind of like just enough. Um, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Such a good
Yeah.
question, man.
Mhm.
Like, I love the honesty of it. I, I like this question because these are the questions I hit my audience with. My guests come on the show. I'm like, dude, I just need answers. Like, people are just looking for answers, right?
Mhm.
I would say this, man. Again, like, I am trying to prepare my own heart and mind. I mean, I'm not there yet to buy the Lambos and the Ferraris, right? But I know people who are. Um, and the way that I've seen this best lived out is, I think most people, when they think about building wealth, it's in order to buy this big house up on the hill, kind of away from everybody else. You have your own kingdom in a sense, right? When I think about the Christian message, it's a message that actually, like Jesus says, is he left the city gates. Like, he went outside of the city gates in order to minister to the people. And so I think a principle for people, like, the calling is to people. The calling is to be around community. And so, like, I think the way me and my wife at least think about it is, we're called more to a place, a people, a church. And so, if you're called to a church or people or a city and your lifestyle is 10x their lifestyle, that could be an issue, because that's going to cause other people to stumble. And so I would just say, man, be where God has called you to be. If he's called you to a place like Laguna Beach, then maybe you can get away with driving a a Porsche or a Lambo or whatever. And that's I don't like, that's fine. I mean, but I think it's more important to just be where God has called you, to serve and to love those around you. And, there's plenty of warnings where Paul's like, we as the, he calls in the stronger faith, those who might be weaker in faith because they struggle with money, don't give them a reason to stumble. And so if driving a Lamborghini, yeah, it might be a sacrifice. Or not driving a Lamborghini might be a sacrifice to you because you can afford it. But you got to think about your community and how they're gonna see that. And unfortunately, that might seem unfair, but that's our calling as Christians, is to really love and serve others. And so, if you think that's unfair, I mean, take that up with the Word of God, not Ellis. I didn't. I'm just trying to live out what I see in Scripture. So, and that's not. Unfortunately, it's not black and white. But I think for me to try and make it black and white, I'm like, where are you called? Look at your community, and what is that? What does their living look like? And try and come alongside that and emulate that as much as possible.
Now, now, I guess another question or thought that just came in mind, as far as like the actual giving aspect, right? That old saying, like you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, and you teach him the fish, you feed him for life, right? So, throughout ministry, as a Christian entrepreneur, you know, where do you find that balance, as far as, because I mean, you could just give someone, hey, you know what, you're short here, you need some money here, let me give it to you right now. But that doesn't really solve the problem for them. You know what I mean? Like, they may come back again and again and again. And they have these repetitive issues, versus, hey, you know what? I'm going to teach you how to do something, or I'm going to send you
Yeah.
here to school or something. Like, where do you find that balance?
Well, no, I think it's a great thing. I mean, I don't think those things have to be separate. I mean, here's the reality: there's always going to be needs that, um, that need to be just that money. You just need to give money to, right? Like, I mean, that's the reality. But then there's, that doesn't mean that we can't support or try and fund development things like education and entrepreneurship and, like reforming our education system. Like, all those things I think are right, and we should be doing that. I would say the way, I mean, here's what I realized. No matter how much we want to teach a man how to fish, that mindset, unfortunately, it's like the 80-20 rule. Like, I have just realized, we're only like, it doesn't matter how much you show them. Like, 80% of the people just want a handout. So what I focus on is 20% of the people, and really serving them and really trying to help them and come alongside them, which is the kingdom capitalists, which is exactly who you're talking about. Those who think, wow, I actually should be thinking about changing the world and creating capital in order to reform things. and create and influence things. So if I tried to do that for 100% of people, I would just leave frustrated, because that's just unfortunately, it's not realistic. So I do think we have to get super targeted in who we're serving and what is our goal. I mean, and it's okay. Like, dude, some people are just called to go serve the 80%, right? I mean, if you look at Jesus's ministry, that's who, I mean, honestly, who did he spend most of his time around? The folks who just needed a handout. And then he really focused in on discipling the 20%, right? Look at his ministry, right? He was influencing and discipling the influencers, and he spent most of his time around people who just needed a handout. And I think, and I think about our own life, like we spend a lot of time mentoring, discipling, coming alongside the influencers of our culture, the kingdom capitalist. And yet we seek to really serve those who just need a fish, and to put it in your lingo. And so I don't think they need to be opposite, or they need to be in tension. It's just our world, man. And so, if you and I are called to really influence the influencers, that's what we should be doing. But let's not also turn a blind eye to those who just need a handout, because it's pretty clear in Jesus's life that he did both.
So let's kind of transition to your podcast, actually, because you've mentioned it a few times, the Kingdom Capitalist. And I just kind of want to, give our audience a bit of an idea of where exactly, did this come about, and kind of what were some of the earlier challenges that you were faced with that?
I mean, honestly, I had a mentor who proposed the name, actually. And so the name I can't really take credit for. And he's like, "Hey, I think you'd be a great fit to really run this." And honestly, I struggle with this, because what I wanted to do, the reason I transitioned out of my role as pastor and missionary is because I wanted to go build a business. And I was like, "Listen, man, I really, like, I just want to focus on real estate, right? Like, I just want to go build our investment firm." And, and he kind of challenged me and pushed me to this. And I'm so glad he did, because what I realized is that again, what I just said, what I get so excited about this movement we're creating is that our community needs mentors and needs heroes and needs people who have already paved the way for what it looks like to be a kingdom capitalist, to be someone who is really serving God and yet influencing and shaping and creating culture. And a lot of that comes from the accumulation of capital, right? Because that's how, in a lot of ways, we create influence in our culture, is through the stewardship of capital. And so I just this podcast started honestly as a hunger, man, as a young guy building his business, saying, how the heck, like, all these questions you're asking is what everybody doesn't have answers to. And so, it's just a eagerness to be like, listen, I know the scriptures have to say more than what we've probably given them credit for. And so, like, how are people living this out? And what I have found, to encourage your audience who's like, yeah, I want to know more about this too. Listen, there are people out there who are doing it, and they're creating business models that allow them to take care of their families in order to live a decent lifestyle. I think some people are worried about, like, oh, I have to be poor in order to be, like, I have to live this. I'm like, listen, no. I know a guy who was just at our last summit. He gives away 50% of his profits in his company, 50%. But think about the way that he structures that. He has a salary, and he's comfortable with his salary, and he works his butt off in order to create a profit in his business, in order to give 50% away of that, right? Like, that's amazing to think about. And so I think those things don't have to be separate, like, oh, you're going to, eat, beans and, rice or whatever. It's like, you can create a successful business, have a model that's has a component of really generosity for yourself, still take care of your family. It's just not anyways, there are people out there. I think I'm encouraged. What I've learned is, like, there are models, there are examples, there are people to learn from as Christians about how to grow and build businesses that can be fulfilling, can take care of us, and yet also honor God in massive ways. So, yeah, man, I'm even, what I mean? Like, I'm so excited to just continue on this journey, because, like, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface about what it really looks like to live in the kingdom and build businesses. So
I think another thought that just came to mind while you were speaking was there was a conversation I had, I think it was about a month or two ago with Maurice Philogene. And he was telling me a story about a friend of his that just bought, I think it was only three condos, and he rented them out, and he just, I think, moved to Thailand. And so he's just living in Thailand, and basically he doesn't have to work. He's got residual income essentially coming in from his properties. So I'm just thinking, for people out there and the listeners, perhaps this doesn't have to necessarily be a massive, scale type business. It could be something smaller, right? With real estate, but it allows you to use another asset that you have, which is time. And it may not necessarily be money. And then you could go off and go on missions trips abroad and not have to worry about money.
Yeah. I mean, totally. Like the two assets we have is, our time and our finances. We're called to be stewards of both of those things. And that's why, I'm passionate about real estate, because I want to give people both. And I think that idea of stewardship of time is so key, because and I say this with caution, and I say this with humility, but like, some people are slaves to their jobs. Like, and if you don't, and you're, well, I don't have time, Ellis. Like, how can I go do these things? Like, I'm working all the time. I'm like, that's a lack of creativity, right? Like, that's a lack of stewardship on your part, because there are plenty of ways to go create passive income. There are plenty of ways to you just have to get educated and begin this journey, because you are definitely called to be a good steward of your time. And so yeah, dude, like, you're right. You don't need to be a kingdom capitalist and go create disruptive businesses, etc. But you can think differently, and there are avenues. And that's why I love this podcast and podcasts like this, because this is how we got started. Legitimately, I bought my first real estate project listening to podcasts. Like, that was all that we had to go off of, because we didn't know anything. And so I do think it takes some hunger and some eagerness and some creativity. But man, this idea of stewardship of time is massive, and so yeah. So thanks for doing this show too, man, because it is, it's people listening to this show who are really, I think we're not speaking to anybody who's not serious about the stewardship of their time. They want more time back. Mm-hmm. And that's as important, if not more, than any money you'll ever accumulate in your life.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a really good point. And I was trying to remember the quote that I read, but it was almost like a dagger in the heart. It struck me so hard. I think it was like yesterday that I saw it, but it was along the lines of what you just said, how people really were just, people are just slaving away at their 9 to 5, and you are essentially slaves to that job, basically, because if you leave the job, then you don't have income, you can't support your family, right? So it almost makes sense. It makes a lot more sense to do this. Oh, another thing, it was I think it was Augustino, and he mentioned how actually the W-2 job is in the highest tax bracket versus taking the entrepreneurial route, which makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Here's the crazy thing, man. We just came out of the longest bull run in our history, and probably one of the wealthiest, like more capital and things have been created in the past 12 years, like, we've never seen before. And as we're listening to this show, we are 8 weeks, about 60 days into shelter in place. Mm-hmm. And the majority of the United States cannot afford their rent payment. Think about that. Can you hear me? Okay, looks like I froze up a little bit. Did you hear what I said there?
Yeah. You said they couldn't afford their rent payment. A majority of the United States. Think about that. Yeah.
So for 12 years, we've had the most prosperous time in the history of our country. And the majority of Americans are going on rent strikes. They're striking their landlords, right? Because they can't pay rent. Think about that. That's an issue. And the thing I have an issue with that, I know people are hurting, and I think we should be neighborly and help one another. But that's your fault, right? That you didn't get. And so if you're listening to this, I just be blunt. For most people, no, I should say this because there are a lot of people who just struggle and like they've come maybe from another country or they've just come out of but I'm talking about the majority of people. And I'll just use my own race, white Americans, right? Who are going on rent strikes. That's your own fault because you did not get educated. You didn't take the time to learn how to save or be a good steward of your money. And so that is something where I'm like, we got to really, and I don't, maybe we're talking to your listeners, maybe we're not, but I do think that's a downfall of our, like, that's on us, right? And when we take responsibility of that, we can change it. And I guess that's my whole point is if you're seeking to blame your landlord or the economy or whatever, you have no power to change that. But as soon as you start taking responsibility for why you can't afford next month's rent, you have a lot of freedom because guess what? Now you have the power to change it. And that's a massive principle that I think I learned when I got to that place in ministry where I was like, we don't have enough money. Well, what am I going to do? Sit there and cry about it while this guy goes hungry? Right? Or am I going to go figure out a way to go create something because I do have the power of God. I do have the mind of God. I do have the creativity of God working in me in order to go create new things. And so when we start taking responsibility for things, a whole new world opens up to us. And maybe that's the message.
That's a very poignant point. I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. I think that, and it goes for anybody. If they are struggling, essentially they couldn't afford to pay next month's rent or last month's rent, even though we had the shelter in place. What is like 60 days now or something like that, but at the time like 30 days. Then I mean, really, that is their own fault. I wholeheartedly agree with you with regards to that because I think that it almost seems as though a lot of people these days just only live now rather than looking down the road. And I mean, I guess a great example would be my brother. So, and I'm always
I'm not throwing out any names. I'm not throwing out any names. I'm probably already going to get enough flack. I don't think I could ever run for president after what I just said, but I do think it's right on, and I don't mean to be harsh on people. I really am compassionate and I'm happy to come alongside my community and help people in our church who are struggling. It's not my point at all. What I'm saying is that the longer you blame others or the economy or whoever, you're only enslaving yourself, right? Like it's the moment you take responsibility is the moment you have the power to change. And so that's the whole message that I'm just trying to say. And that's the idea. And that's the heart of entrepreneurship, right? Is like, we just believe we have the power to change things. And I hope that really hits people in a good way.
Yeah. So is there anything else that, you'd like to give, I guess, a word of advice or something to our listeners?
I think that was a pretty good one. I mean, if you're just looking for more advice, I think the thing that's helped me go further and farther and faster than anything is my network, is just investing in building my network. I think everything that we've been able to accomplish over the past 3 years has been a result of one other relationship. And so I always say, like, you're really one connection away from accomplishing pretty much any goal that you have. And so I would just say, like, find ways to start building your network. A podcast show is a great way. LinkedIn is another great way. Going to conferences. Because like even starting our own firm, like one of the things that kept me from kind of bringing things in house is I just didn't have a team. And so it was finding the right guys, right? The right pieces in place, to really accelerate and take off. So that would be it. And then I would just love to invite, if there are anybody who's hearing this, who's like, I mean, I'm a kingdom capitalist. I want to be around other kingdom-minded real estate entrepreneurs. Listen, we have that community and we're here to serve you and come alongside you. You're going to have to invest in it, right? Like, and you're going to have to invest in yourself. But we're here for you, and please reach out to me because I'd love to get to know you and come alongside of you. And so would our community.
And how could they reach out to you?
Yeah, you can email me, Ellis at kingdomcapitalists.co. That's kingdomcapitalists with an S.co. Or just find me on LinkedIn. Shoot me a direct message. I stay pretty active on LinkedIn. And if they'd like to hear more about our podcast show, like if you like some of this content, we do this every single week at the Kingdom Capitalist Show on iTunes, Spotify, wherever.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ellis. It was a pleasure having you on here.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me. This was fun. We didn't really talk, which I love, that we didn't even talk about real estate, but I do think like we hit the foundational pieces for people today. And, that is where it has to start anyway. So thanks for I don't know, man, asking great questions. This is really fun. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.